In the world of corporate intrigue and personal betrayal, the quest for justice often intertwines with the complexities of human relationships. This tale unfolds against the backdrop of ambition gone awry, where trust is shattered and lives are irrevocably changed. Our protagonist finds himself navigating the murky waters of deceit, heartbreak, and ultimately, redemption. As the courtroom drama escalates, we witness how hope can pierce through the clouds of despair, illuminating the path toward recovery and renewal. Join us on this journey as we explore the resilience of the human spirit in the face of betrayal and the powerful force of justice that seeks to restore balance in a chaotic world. A tale of betrayal, loss, and redemption. This is a story about the relentless fight for justice, the pain of betrayal, and the gradual journey towards restoration. It's about how, even in the darkest times, the flicker of hope can pierce through the clouds of despair. Follow our hero as he navigates a harrowing journey, triumphing over the forces of evil and reviving his shattered spirit. I often find myself puzzled by the confidence some people exude. They seem to create their own paths, fearlessly pursuing their desires. A good friend of mine once told me that such people are nothing but fools, destined to face consequences for their actions. While I generally agreed with this perspective, I couldn't help but accelerate the reckoning for my own abuser. If only I hadn't forgotten my jacket at home, the events that followed might have taken a different turn. My 18-wheeler was loaded and ready for a 600-mile delivery, but my jacket hung forgotten in my closet. My supervisor wasn't thrilled, but begrudgingly granted me a few extra minutes to retrieve it. As I navigated the narrow streets, the trailer wheels scraped the curb and the brakes hissed as I brought the truck to a stop in front of my house. It struck me as odd to see my boss's car parked in my driveway. Dismissing the nagging thought, I hurried inside, my heart racing as I dashed down the hallway toward the bedroom I shared with my wife. What I found there shattered my world. I swung the door open, flooding the room with light, only to be greeted by a scene that would haunt me. My wife, Diane, on all fours, oblivious to my presence, while my boss loomed over her, a twisted grin on his face. Anger surged through me, a mix of betrayal and disbelief. My hands trembled as I snatched my forgotten jacket from the wardrobe, my voice a roar as I shouted, "We'll talk later!" I stormed out, slamming both the bedroom and front door behind me. As I climbed back into the cab of my Kenworth truck, the anger bubbled beneath the surface, but I fought to regain control. Driving through the suburban streets and onto the freeway, doubt gnawed at me, making me question my return home. Lost in thought, I barely noticed the truck hit a bump, veering off the road toward a looming tree trunk. The world faded away. "Looks like he's regaining consciousness," a distant female voice remarked. I struggled to open my eyes, but my body felt immobile, and I couldn't shake the fog in my mind. Another familiar voice, Diane's, murmured words of relief. "Thank heavens," she whispered, and I sensed hands brushing against my face. A commanding male voice followed, echoing through the haze. "Good morning, Mr. Hammond. It's good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" I tried to respond, but no words came. After a tremendous effort, I finally pried my eyes open, blinking against the bright lights of the hospital room. Shadows of figures moved about, but their faces remained unclear. "Mr. Hammond," the male voice boomed again. "If you can hear me, blink." I complied, and the voice continued. "You've been in an accident and are currently in a hospital. Please don't attempt to move. You've sustained multiple fractures. We kept you in an induced coma for 14 days while we stabilized you. Do you understand?" "Yes," I thought, blinking once more. "Very well. We'll focus on your recovery. It will be a gradual process, but we'll get you back on your feet." Overcome with exhaustion, I drifted back into the realm of dreams. When I next awoke, the room was dark. The chair beside me was empty, replaced by a makeshift cot where Diane lay asleep, covered by a thin hospital blanket. Memories began flooding back, picking up my truck from the depot, realizing my jacket was still at home, and bursting into the bedroom to find my wife with my boss. Everything began to click into place. "Traitor!" I wanted to scream, but only a faint sound escaped my lips, enough to rouse Diane from her slumber. She rushed to my side, her face a mix of relief and concern. "Steve, you're awake." I recoiled instinctively as she reached for my face. I hoped my eyes conveyed the rage and betrayal that coursed through me. Days passed in a haze of medication and pain. In addition to fracturing both legs, I had sustained an unexamined back injury. My truck was totaled, but the car behind me had quickly reported the accident, and an ambulance arrived just in time. The doctors meticulously outlined my injuries and the rehabilitation plan that lay ahead. Throughout it all, Diane remained by my side, her presence both a comfort and a torment. My ability to speak returned, but I struggled with what to say to the woman who had betrayed me. One day, during a rare moment when Diane stepped out to use the restroom, a nurse entered the room. Seizing the opportunity, I managed to ask, "What's the extent of my injuries?" "Mr. Hammond, you've been through a lot. The fractures will heal, but the emotional recovery might take longer," she replied gently. "You have a long road ahead, but we'll support you every step of the way." As I lay in that sterile hospital bed, I couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. I was ready to confront the darkness that had invaded my life. I would fight for justice, not just for myself, but for the hope of finding peace again. The road to recovery would be long, but the light of hope was beginning to shine through the clouds of betrayal, guiding me toward a future where I could reclaim my spirit and my life. As the nurse commented on Diane's unwavering devotion, I couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and disbelief. Diane had been by my side since I woke up, steadfastly refusing to leave my hospital room, and I chose not to shatter her illusion of normalcy just yet. Once the nurse departed, I turned to Diane, determined to get some answers. "How long, Diane?" I asked, my voice steady but urgent. She looked taken aback by my directness. "They suspect you fell asleep at the wheel," she ventured cautiously, her eyes searching mine. "They anticipate your recovery will take several months." "That's not what I'm asking, and you know it," I shot back, my patience thinning. "I certainly didn't fall asleep at the wheel. Something caused my truck to swerve off the road. Now about you and my boss, how long have you two been having an affair behind my back?" Diane's face paled. "Steve, I really don't want to discuss him right now. I love you, and only you. I'm dedicated to helping you recover from this terrible accident." "Well, you might consider me ungrateful for saying so, but the last time I saw you two together, it certainly didn't look like love was in the air." I paused, letting my words sink in. "It also occurs to me that this isn't the first time you've been with him, is it?" She didn't need to respond. The guilt etched across her face said it all as her gaze dropped to the floor, avoiding mine. "So, my unfaithful Diane, how long has this been going on?" "Steve, I really don't want to discuss it," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "Do you want a divorce then?" I asked, the coldness of my words echoing in the room. "Oh God, no!" she exclaimed, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, trust me when I say I love you and only you. I want to have your children. I want to grow old with you." That sentiment felt like a distant dream now. "That seems unlikely, Diane. You betrayed our wedding vows. Remember when we promised to be faithful to each other until death do us part?" "Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you by surviving the crash, but it appears you couldn't wait for my demise. The prospect of us living happily ever after seems rather slim. Wouldn't you agree?" She recoiled from my harsh words, sinking into her chair, her hands covering her face as she began to cry softly. "I think you should go home, Diane. You might find me ungrateful for not appreciating your loyalty, but whenever I see you, all I can envision is my boss violating you." With a loud sob, she grabbed her small overnight bag and stumbled out of the room, leaving me alone in a whirlwind of pain and betrayal. A nurse walked by and noticed Diane's absence, but I chose not to respond. Instead, I asked her to notify my supervisor at work that I was ready to receive visitors. Less than an hour later, Phil showed up, a concerned expression etched across his face. "I saw the truck, Steve. You're one lucky guy. I can't believe you made it out of there alive," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Yeah, well, thanks for coming, Phil," I replied, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside me. I've been replaying the accident in my mind for days, even though my memory is a bit blurry. Something broke on that truck. It was completely out of control. Phil raised an eyebrow, still skeptical but willing to listen. I thought Diane might have been with you. Has she been around? She just left, I said, trying to gauge his reaction. Why do you ask? No particular reason, Steve. Just assumed she'd be here, he replied, shifting uncomfortably on his feet before making his excuses to leave. As I watched him go, it struck me that Diane's affair with my boss might not be as discreet as she believed. The next day, 2 colleagues visited me, George Lambert, the workshop foreman, and a stern union representative named Jack McGregor. Neither seemed particularly pleased to be there. Jack took charge, his voice steady yet serious. Steve, we've encountered an issue. I brought George along to explain. Your accident was, unfortunately, inevitable, and I've already initiated the process to inspect every tractor in the fleet before its next operation. Management is furious, George chimed in. Deliveries will be delayed, and some customers are threatening to switch carriers if we can't meet their needs. Jack handed me the workshop log for my damaged tractor. Flipping through its pages, I noticed a highlighted note on the last page about a broken spring on the front axle. Turn back to the previous page, I instructed, my heart racing. As I flipped through the log, I found an almost identical note about another broken spring from 3 weeks prior. Damn it, George, why didn't you replace it? Management wouldn't allow me to hold up the truck, George replied, his voice tinged with regret. I had a replacement in the workshop 2 weeks ago, but they refused to let me take the rig off the road because they were too busy. They kept saying it would be fixed at the next service. So nobody thought to inform me about this? I questioned, incredulous. I'm sorry, Steve. The boss was convinced it was a minor issue. It didn't occur to me until after the accident, George apologized, looking genuinely remorseful. Rubbish, Jack interrupted. They knew the risk and gambled with your life. I contacted our legal team today and they've assigned Tim Delaney to handle your case. He already has the logbook entries and statements from other drivers. This guy's a real fighter. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of my situation. We need to tackle this on 2 fronts, Jack continued, getting you compensated for medical bills, rehab, and lost wages, and securing a package for the possibility that you won't be able to drive professionally again due to your back injury. The weight of Jack's words hit me hard. I hadn't even considered the possibility of not returning to work. As I lay back in bed, closing my eyes, the overwhelming reality began to sink in. I had crashed my truck, been in a coma, and now faced the grim prospect of losing not just my job, but my wife as well. The next day, Tim Delaney entered my room exuding energy and confidence. He was an imposing figure, well over 6 feet tall, with a physique that suggested he could easily play professional basketball. We spent the next hour going over the crash, the workshop reports, and the potential future options. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long and arduous battle, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my fate anymore. It had been 2 years since I started pursuing my business degree when the unexpected question came up. What made you abandon that path and switch to truck driving? I smiled, recalling the roots of my journey. Well, my father was a long-haul truck driver, and he often took me along during my school years. So the transition wasn't as drastic as it might seem to you, but there's more to it. I fell in love with a wonderful girl, and we couldn't wait to get married. No, she wasn't pregnant. We were just head over heels for each other, and changing careers allowed us to be together more. Touching story, Steve, my friend replied, though his tone shifted slightly. But I've heard rumors that things might not be going so well between you two. My heart sank. Am I the last person in the state to find out? I sighed, the weight of reality crashing down on me. My wife, Diane, had been cheating on me with my boss. I confirmed it with your boss, Tim said, incredulous. I look forward to tearing him apart in court. The thought of facing my boss in a legal battle stirred a mix of anger and determination within me. I don't really care about him anymore, but I need you to start preparing divorce papers as soon as possible. Tim, known for his dedication and expertise, replied, "We don't usually handle divorces, but I'm willing to make an exception for you." During our brief time together, I had come to trust Tim deeply. He radiated compassion, energy, and integrity, qualities that brought me hope and solace during this dark time. He meticulously outlined a strategy for my legal action against my employers, ensuring I would receive expert advice regarding my separation from Diane. For the first time since my accident, a flicker of optimism found its way into my mind. Days passed as I focused on my recovery therapy, enduring medical examinations, including CAT scans, to devise a treatment plan for my aching back. Then, an unexpected visitor entered my hospital room, requesting to confirm my identity. I became vigilant as he handed me a small envelope, poised to ask for my signature. But as he glanced at the array of tubes connected to me, he quickly retreated, mumbling, "Good day, sir," as he disappeared into anonymity. Summoning a nurse, I asked her to open the envelope and share its contents with me. She turned pale as she read aloud, "It's a termination notice from your company." Shock coursed through me. "How could they do this to you while you're still hospitalized?" she whispered. I requested that she call Tim on my behalf and read him the letter. As expected, he arrived within minutes, seething with anger over the callousness of my employer. "This letter will cost them dearly," he vowed. "It essentially removes the need for us to argue in court about your ability to continue working in your chosen career. His cold and calculated treatment of you, a recovering employee, won't earn him any favors." What started as a typical day on the road to recovery quickly transformed from hopelessness to optimism. Tim had a knack for instilling positivity in me. As he was leaving, he casually added, "Oh, and by the way, your wife was served with divorce papers today." The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Diane hadn't visited since she left in tears, but now she entered my room visibly furious. "How could you do this to me?" she cried. "I don't want a divorce. I made a mistake, Steve. A mistake. But I love you, and I want us to stay together and work it out." I was prepared for this confrontation. "Diane, your way of expressing love is peculiar," I said, my voice steady. "It's distressing enough to witness firsthand the damage you've inflicted on our marriage. It appears I was the last to know what was truly happening. It's evident now that every time I embarked on a long journey, it signaled another rendezvous with my boss. When I previously inquired about the extent of your affair, you evaded the question. But honestly, it doesn't matter now. You've repeatedly disrespected me and our marriage vows." "Have I ever denied you, Steve? Is that your defense?" she asked incredulously. "Honestly, Diane, I expected better from you. How many times have you two been together since my accident?" She averted her gaze, falling silent. I wondered if her silence meant they hadn't been together at all. Could there still be hope? "We've had a solid marriage until now," I reminded her. "Let's not tarnish our good memories with anger and deceit. We will have to discuss the division of assets eventually, but now isn't the time. Go home, Diane. If he brings you happiness, file for divorce and be with him. But don't expect me to be your life partner anymore. I can't look at you without reliving the moment I caught you with him. There's no way to move past that. Goodbye, Diane. I wish you a happy life." She left my hospital room in tears, and this time I hoped it would be the last time I'd see her. Initially, my limbs began to recover. I maneuvered around the ward with plaster casts, undergoing multiple therapy sessions each day. However, my back injury was severe, necessitating stabilization with metal plates to fuse several vertebrae. The delicate surgery lasted hours, and the subsequent recovery proved grueling, marked by persistent pain until my eventual discharge. I found myself relying on a regiment of painkillers to cope with the discomfort. Meanwhile, Tim Delaney pursued legal action aggressively against the transport company, exploring every avenue of recourse. Despite initial hopes for a pre-trial settlement, I found myself in court as Tim presented my case to a judge. By day's end, witness testimonies overwhelmingly favored Tim, undermining the company's defense. Before the second day began, The company's solicitors sought to settle out of court. "I'm aiming for maximum impact," Tim declared as we entered the negotiation room. "They've lost and they know it. Now they're just trying to limit the fallout." In keeping with his promise, Tim issued a challenge, insisting on a minimum of $10 million in damages and compensation. He emphasized my ongoing medical expenses, the pain I was enduring, and the uncertainty surrounding retraining for a new career. Surprisingly, even I found myself swept up in the determination to fight for what was rightfully mine. A new beginning. As I sat there reflecting on my situation, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sympathy and frustration. The negotiations needed to wrap up before the court reconvened at 11 a.m., which was fortuitous. When the defense presented their initial offer of $5 million, Tim, my attorney, barely concealed a triumphant smirk. We both knew that we would likely settle somewhere in the middle of their offer, and my initial demand of $10 million. Tim was relentless, pushing back against their proposals until both sides finally agreed on $8.5 million. I let out a sigh of relief. The weight of this battle was finally lifting. This was the first time I had encountered my boss since the accident, and I couldn't help but notice his visible anger. He struggled to meet my gaze, and I felt a small measure of satisfaction at his discomfort. With the legal matters resolved, I decided to visit the depot one last time to say goodbye to my colleagues. George, whose meticulous records had highlighted the company's negligence, and Jock, who had tirelessly advocated for my fair treatment, both deserved my gratitude. It was time for a fresh start. I made the decision to relocate to my parents' hometown, where I had once studied. I planned to resume my education, hoping to secure a stable administrative position. I found a cozy 2-bedroom apartment near the university and bought a small hatchback to get around. Returning to academia was an intriguing experience. I was now a decade older than most of my peers, yet significantly more motivated. Success became not just a goal, but a genuine aspiration. My parents were thrilled with my new arrangement, and I made it a priority to visit them every weekend. Whether it was taking my dad to football games or going fishing in the bay, our time together was precious. We often enjoyed meals at local restaurants, savoring the chance to reconnect. Although Diane hadn't signed the divorce papers yet, she seemed to be managing the mortgage and utilities well, so I decided not to push the issue, preferring to avoid any unnecessary conflict. Following Tim Delaney's advice, I arranged for a security agency to install several cameras in our house until the divorce was finalized. He believed it was wise to monitor the premises without needing to check in physically. 2 years later, I graduated with honors, my hard work paying off. The search for a long-term job led me to an accounting firm in the city center, specializing in corporate bankruptcy management. Their innovative approach focused on assessing operations and attempting to restore profitability before resorting to bankruptcy, sometimes requiring sacrifices from creditors. I found this work incredibly fulfilling. As part of a small, seasoned team, I conducted forensic examinations of various companies to identify weaknesses, collaborating with key personnel to devise turnaround strategies. It didn't take long for my knack for pinpointing corporate issues to be recognized. By the end of the year, both partners and colleagues acknowledged my contributions, entrusting me with leading my own team and significantly increasing my salary. Then, one morning, a new task landed on my desk. To my shock, the company in financial distress was none other than my former employer. Acknowledging the potential conflict of interest, I promptly called the senior partner to request to be excused from the case. His response was surprising. "Steve, we understand your prior connection with this company, which actually makes you the ideal candidate. You likely still have former colleagues depending on the business for their livelihoods, giving you an additional incentive to help them out of this situation. Moreover, I have faith in your professionalism." Reluctantly, I accepted the assignment. My first task was to inform my old boss that our firm had been appointed to lead the management team. As I explained our role, he launched into a tirade about the perceived injustice of it all. He insisted there was no significant issue, just a minor cash flow hiccup that had been resolved. I calmly reminded him that our involvement had been mandated by the courts and that we were tasked with conducting a thorough investigation. I informed him we would be arriving at 9 o'clock the following morning and thanked him in advance for his cooperation before hanging up. When my team and I arrived, it became immediately clear that the staff had been instructed to provide as little information as possible, consistently hindering our progress. This response from management was not unexpected. We represented their failure to effectively manage their own business. That morning, I discussed our approach over coffee with Jack and George, and after a group meeting at lunchtime, I made a decision. I knocked on my boss's door, entered, and suggested that it might be less awkward for him to vacate the premises, allowing my team to proceed with our work. Initially, he rejected the idea outright, but when he realized I had the authority to request his removal by force, he begrudgingly acquiesced, leaving like a disgruntled child. It took me 2 days to identify the core issue plaguing the company. One of my team members, a petite blonde with pigtails who appeared no older than 16 and had just graduated from a commercial school, approached me with a ledger from a creditor. This driver is employed by the company and receives regular payments for long-distance trips across the state. However, I've checked, and I can't find the same truck listed on any of the freight manifests. What exactly is it being used for, and who is footing the bill? She inquired. I expressed my gratitude for her keen observation skills. Her initiative would prove invaluable as we unraveled the layers of mismanagement and deceit. Little did I know that this young woman would be instrumental in leading us to the truth and restoring integrity to the company that once seemed beyond saving. The phenomenon of phantom operators is a notorious tactic among transportation companies that rely on subcontracted vehicles. It usually comes to light when someone in the accounting department is so dedicated to hiding their actions that they never take a day off. However, this wasn't the case here. As I reviewed the invoices, it became glaringly obvious that each one had been personally approved by the boss himself. Determined to dig deeper, I summoned the administration manager. Did the company provide the boss with a laptop? I inquired, curious about any potential digital footprints. Absolutely, he replied with an air of enthusiasm. About a year ago, we purchased 4 Dell laptops, and the boss has the highest-end model among them. I can get you the invoice if you'd like. I grinned internally, making a mental note of the laptop's serial number. My next step was to contact the local sheriff for assistance. I need to retrieve a company device from a manager's house, but I suspect he won't be willing to give it up, I explained. The laptop likely contains crucial information for our investigation. Though somewhat hesitant, the sheriff agreed to pick me up from the depot office in about 15 minutes. As we drove, he began to ask questions. You used to work for this company, right? Yes, I confirmed, recalling my tumultuous history. Remember that nasty accident? I had to deal with the wreckage recovery. I was lucky to make it out alive. Yeah, I remember, he said, a hint of concern in his voice. You left your wife when you moved out, didn't you? That's correct, I responded, reflecting on the painful choice I had made. Is that guy still involved with her? He inquired, his tone probing. I wouldn't know, Sheriff. I filed for divorce when I left. It's not finalized yet, but I have no romantic attachments at the moment, and frankly, I don't care who she's with. Well, I think she spends her nights alone, he replied, while he visits during the day. He's married with kids and goes home every night. His wife is probably the only one unaware of what's happening. That makes 2 of us, I retorted bitterly. I had no clue either until I stumbled upon them in the act. That was the day of the accident. The sheriff and I had agreed he would allow me to request the laptop and would only intervene if necessary. Unsurprisingly, it became necessary sooner than expected. When I confronted the manager, he initially tried to hand over an older model that didn't match my description. However, upon seeing my determination and the sheriff's squad car pulling up, he reluctantly surrendered the correct laptop, assuring me it would be returned to him within 24 hours. I anticipated he might be correct about that. I asked the sheriff to drop me back at the office, where I quickly gathered my team. One member was immediately tasked with downloading all the contents from the laptop onto our security server. This precaution would ensure compliance with any future court orders while also enabling us to maintain a hidden auto-forward function to monitor any subsequent activity. Just as I had expected, a young lawyer, likely fresh out of law school, arrived to demand the immediate return of the laptop. We initially argued that the laptop belonged to the company, not to his client, but we ultimately conceded he had the authority to take possession of it. Thankfully, we had returned the laptop to its case before the lawyer arrived, giving the impression that it hadn't been tampered with. With a sense of victory gleaming in his eyes, the lawyer eagerly took possession of the laptop and hurried back to his car. Meanwhile, my IT team began examining the downloaded contents. To our surprise, their task was simplified by the absence of passwords, granting us surprisingly easy access to everything we needed. As we focused on bank records, a series of transactions spanning several years caught our attention. These records revealed a troubling pattern. Substantial sums of money were being diverted through fraudulent invoices, all of which had been approved by the boss himself. Our next objective was to trace this money trail. Initially, payments were funneled to a bank account set up under the guise of a phantom contractor, which was naturally controlled by the company's boss. The account maintained only a nominal balance, indicating that the funds were being redirected elsewhere to evade detection. By deciphering codes from the downloaded files, we uncovered a network of accounts where the money had been concealed, dispersed across various countries and registered under different names. Realizing we needed legal expertise to navigate this complex web, I reached out to Tim Delaney, the lawyer who had successfully handled my compensation case. He had been promoted to partner since our last encounter and was eager to assist. When we met, he was genuinely pleased to see me and equally excited about the prospect of pursuing legal action against my former boss. After days filled with intense meetings with regulatory authorities and law enforcement agencies, we concluded it was imperative for the police to press charges of embezzlement immediately and seek the defendant's incarceration without bail to prevent him from fleeing the country. On the day James Seward was arrested, I received an unexpected visitor at the transportation company office. "Steve, there's a Mrs. Seward waiting for you at the reception desk," the young receptionist informed me. "All right, send her in," I replied, intrigued by the impending encounter. The woman who entered my temporary office, which I had commandeered in the boss's absence, was stunning. She was blonde, well-built, impeccably dressed, and radiated elegance. Extending her hand for a handshake, she gracefully took a seat opposite my desk. "Mr. Hammond, I am James Seward's spouse," she stated, her voice steady and confident. I had gathered as much from the receptionist, but her presence made the reality of the situation even more palpable. "How may I assist you today, Mrs. Seward?" Mr. Hammond asked, his tone professional yet slightly wary. "I know that you played a significant role in my husband's imprisonment," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. "That might be an exaggeration, Mrs. Seward. We have substantial evidence indicating that your husband unlawfully diverted significant sums of money from his company, jeopardizing its future. Due to the risk of flight, he is currently detained pending trial. Therefore, it is your husband's actions that have led to this situation, not mine." "What knowledge do you have regarding the company's ownership?" she pressed, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Only what is documented in the corporate records. There are 2 shares held individually by you and your husband, but I assume you're already aware of this." "I am aware. If I were to mention my maiden name, you would likely recognize my family. We were early investors in this company and have heavily financed its growth through loans secured by my family. Although there are only 2 shares, as you mentioned, the entirety of the company's funding has been provided by us. If the company fails, my husband stands to lose the single share initially given to him. He has demonstrated competence in managing the company during its early stages, and I still have faith in his abilities," she explained, her resolve evident despite the storm brewing around her. The situation was undeniably complicated. During our initial examination of the company's structure, we had noted a significant number of loans originating from a single investor, but we hadn't yet connected those dots to Mrs. Seward. "With all due respect to your husband, our investigation suggests that he has not been entirely truthful with you. This will be taken into account by the court in the upcoming weeks. We've already taken legal action to prevent him from accessing any part of the company's affairs. Additionally, we've reassured the staff that the organization is likely to trade its way out of its financial difficulties. Our findings indicate that it should be operating profitably, and its current precarious state is the result of illicit activities, details of which I cannot disclose at this moment. However, I assure you that we won't leave until we're confident in securing its future or, if necessary, liquidating its assets. Mrs. Seward, composed yet visibly shaken, rose from her seat, thanked me, and exited the office, leaving behind a faint trace of her perfume. When the court convened, we were ready. We had gathered all necessary evidence. Not only did we understand how Seward had funneled funds using a fictitious contractor, but we also tracked precisely where and when those funds were transferred. His motives, however, remained unclear. It appeared none of the embezzled funds had been spent on tangible items. Our lawyer, Tim Delaney, methodically dismantled Seward's defense. Initially, Seward attempted to dodge direct questions, clearly unaware of the breadth of the information we had amassed. What he didn't know was that Tim had installed security cameras, a detail he had chosen not to disclose until now. When Seward was brought back to the witness stand, he visibly paled under the barrage of financial inquiries. Then, Tim shifted gears. "Mr. Seward," he began innocently, "are you acquainted with a Mrs. Diane Hammond?" "Yes," Seward replied, his face turning a shade paler. "Could you elaborate on your relationship with Mrs. Hammond?" "Certainly. She is the spouse of one of my former drivers. We would occasionally meet at company gatherings," he explained, attempting to maintain his composure. "Is there anything else you wish to disclose about your association with Mrs. Hammond?" Feeling increasingly unsettled and frustrated by Tim's persistent questioning, Seward replied, "I have no personal relationship with Mrs. Hammond. As I mentioned, she is merely the wife of a former employee who is currently involved in investigating my company." "Have you ever engaged in sexual activity with Mrs. Hammond?" Delaney pressed. "Absolutely not!" Seward exclaimed, almost too quickly. "Your Honor, I request to release this witness for a potential recall later and call Mr. Brian Smith to the stand," Delaney stated firmly. The judge granted permission. A burly man, approximately 40 years old and carrying a bit more weight than advisable, casually approached the witness stand and was sworn in. "Mr. Smith, could you please state your full name and occupation for the court?" Delaney asked. "Brian James Smith. I work as a security consultant with ABC Security. Could you inform the court of the task I assigned you on April 19th, 2 years ago? I was tasked with installing 5 security cameras at the residence owned by Mr. and Mrs. Steve Hammond. Are these cameras still operational?" "Yes, sir. Their footage is automatically transferred to our servers every 24 hours. Who is responsible for monitoring these surveillance recordings? Up until yesterday, when you requested to see them, nobody had reviewed them. With the court's permission, I would like to present 5 photographs. May I proceed?" Delaney asked, looking at the judge. The judge nodded, granting approval. Delaney theatrically handed the first photo to Mr. Smith, who examined it with a stoic expression. "Could you identify the individuals in this photograph and, if possible, the location where it was taken?" "Certainly. The man in the photo is the defendant, James Seward. I'm not familiar with the woman, but she is seated in the gallery." He pointed out Diane, who was visibly shrinking into her seat. "Could you describe what the individuals in the photograph were doing at the time?" "They were engaged in sexual activity." "Sexual intercourse?" Delaney clarified. "Yes, sir." "Your Honor, I have 4 additional photographs taken at separate times over the recent weeks from the security cameras in the home." The courtroom was charged with tension, each revelation pulling back the curtain on a scandal that was unfolding in front of our eyes. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, it became increasingly clear that the truth about James Seward's dealings and the possible implications for everyone involved was far more intricate than anyone could have anticipated. A tale of betrayal, justice, and new beginnings. "I'd like to submit this evidence to the court," I announced, holding up a folder filled with photographs and an affidavit from Mr. Smith that confirmed their authenticity and the strategic placement of security cameras. "Your Honor, I request that Mr. Seward be recalled to the stand." The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with tension as Mr. Seward shuffled into his seat. The man had clearly endured a severe beating. His eyes were downcast, and as the questions began to roll in, he averted his gaze to the floor. Finally, under the weight of the evidence presented, he admitted to committing perjury. Once Seward's testimony concluded, the court adjourned for the day. When we reconvened the next morning, the judge wasted no time in delivering the verdict. He declared Seward guilty of embezzlement, amounting to millions of dollars, and noted the additional charges stemming from his inappropriate relationship with an employee's spouse. However, the sentencing would be postponed for several weeks, leaving us satisfied with the outcome of our collective efforts. Thanks to the intelligence we had gathered regarding overseas financial institutions and account details, we discovered that the majority of the stolen funds were recoverable. Meeting with Phil George, Jack, and other senior staff at the transport terminal felt like a triumphant celebration. We reassured them that the missing funds had been located, outstanding debts settled, and the courts had granted permission for normal trading activities to resume. Phil was poised to take over as CEO, and with the unwavering support of his dedicated team, the company was expected to thrive once more. Ownership had shifted to Seward's wife, who had remained a steadfast supporter throughout their tumultuous ordeal. A few days later, while enjoying dinner with Tim Delaney, I noticed Diane approaching our table. Rising to greet her, I invited her to join us, and as we had just placed our orders, I quickly signaled a waiter to take her drink and meal preferences. However, I could tell she was visibly uncomfortable in our presence, and Tim Delaney didn't seem thrilled about her being there either.
"I'm sorry for intruding like this,"
she began, her voice wavering slightly. "When I found out you had made dinner reservations here, I realized it was time for us to have a long overdue conversation. So here I am. What's on your mind?" By now, I assumed she must be aware that James and I had plans to leave the country together to start a new life.
"James kept hinting he would soon have the means to support us," she continued, "but he never shared how."
I sat in stunned silence as she spoke. The company's sudden bankruptcy had left me reeling. I had believed it was thriving. To learn in court that my partner for many years, was planning to fund our new life by embezzling from his own company was a bitter pill to swallow. "This isn't really the right time or place for this discussion," I interjected, feeling uncomfortable. "Perhaps we could talk about this another time?"
"No, Steve. I was foolish to discard your love so carelessly," she insisted, her gaze steady.
I was even more foolish to think our relationship was serious when I knew all along that James was still involved with his wife. I doubt I was ever more than a secret affair to him. But gradually, I let myself believe I was in love with him. Clearly, given the amount of money he managed to hide over the years, he must have felt something for me, too. Her voice trembled as she rummaged through her purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "Here's the divorce petition you signed, without any strings attached. You're officially free of me. We'll need to discuss the house, but I won't be making any further claims, considering I'm the one who wrecked our relationship in the first place." "Thanks for the dinner invitation, but I've suddenly lost my appetite," she added hastily, a sheen of tears in her eyes. She quickly excused herself, leaving me and Tim to process the unexpected encounter. "That was certainly surprising," I remarked, forcing a smile to break the tension. "Now, perhaps we can enjoy our dinner." About a month later, the court reconvened for the sentencing hearing, and Tim Delaney and I decided to attend. To our surprise, Diane was also present in the gallery, dressed in a conservative business suit that made her look stunning. The sentencing itself was brief. The judge rescinded the charges and the guilty verdict, handing down a substantial prison sentence for each offense. The total amounted to over 20 years, but with time served, Seward would be eligible for parole in just under 10 years. As he glanced up and caught my eye, I could see the relief on my face reflected back at me. I was almost certain he mouthed a phrase that might have been, "Screw you." But I didn't care. The man who had stolen my wife while I was working tirelessly on the road was finally facing the consequences of his actions. In just 3 months, he had lost his hidden wealth, his business, his mistress, and now he was being escorted away to begin his sentence. I flashed him my most cheerful smile. As I turned to leave, I noticed Seward's soon-to-be ex-wife in the gallery. She smiled at me as we crossed paths near the exit. "Care to join me for lunch?" she offered, her voice warm and inviting. I could hear my ex-wife Diane nearby, sputtering in disbelief as I responded with a grin. "I'd love to." Diane quickly averted her gaze, visibly upset by the turn of events. The woman took my arm, and we strolled leisurely to a tranquil restaurant close to the courthouse. After enduring years of anguish, embarrassment, and disappointment, I finally felt a surge of optimism about what the future might hold. This story serves as a powerful reminder that even in life's darkest moments, there is hope for a brighter tomorrow. It illustrates how justice can triumph over evil, and how losses can lead to new beginnings and personal growth.